In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam. Today, I stand before you not as the president of Burkina Faso, but as your humble brother in faith, Ibrahim Traorè, a son of this sacred soil, a servant of Allah who has witnessed the trials of our people and the unyielding spirit that binds us. I come to you in this blessed gathering, under the shadow of our mosques, where the call to prayer echoes the call to justice, to speak from the heart about our shared destiny. For too long, the winds of division have swept across our lands, but today, I call upon you, the faithful Ummah of Burkina Faso and beyond, to rally in support of the works and endeavors of our government. Not for the sake of power, but for the sake of our dignity, our sovereignty, and the greater glory of Africa. Let us begin by reflecting on the profound teachings of our faith. The Holy Quran reminds us in Surah Al-Hujurat, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. This verse is not merely a call to piety. It is a blueprint for unity, a divine command to transcend the artificial barriers imposed upon us by those who seek to exploit our divisions. In Burkina Faso, we face enemies both seen and unseen, jihadist insurgents who twist the words of our prophet, peace be upon him, to sow terror, foreign powers who plunder our gold, our uranium, and our future while pretending to offer aid, and the lingering scars of colonialism that have left our people in poverty despite the richness of our earth. My government has risen to confront these challenges head-on. We have reclaimed our resources from neo-colonial grips, invested in our agriculture to feed our children, strengthened our defenses to protect our villages, and forged alliances with true African brothers to build a continent free from external chains. But this struggle is not mine alone, nor is it the burden of soldiers or politicians. It is the jihad of the entire Ummah, the righteous striving that our faith demands. I urge you, my Muslim brothers and sisters, to lend your unwavering support to these efforts. When we expel foreign exploiters and nationalize our mines, it is not just an economic victory. It is a fulfillment of the Prophet's command to uplift the oppressed and resist tyranny. When we build schools and hospitals in the Sahel, it is an act of Sadaqah Yariyah, a continuous charity that echoes the Hadith. The best of people are those who are most beneficial to others. Your support, through your prayers, your voices in the community, your participation in national initiatives, will fortify these works, ensuring that Burkina Faso stands as a beacon of Islamic justice in Africa. And let us extend this call beyond our borders, to the vast tapestry of Africa itself. Our continent, blessed by Allah with abundant resources and resilient peoples, has been fragmented by lines drawn in European boardrooms. Yet, Islam teaches us solidarity. The believers are but brothers, as declared in Surah Al-Hujurat. Supporting the broader African cause means standing with our siblings in Mali against insurgencies, in Niger for economic independence, in the alliance of Sahel states for mutual defense. It means rejecting the puppet regimes propped up by Western interests and embracing Pan-African unity, as envisioned by leaders like Thomas Sankara, who drew from the same well of justice that nourishes our faith. When Muslims across Africa unite in this support, we dismantle the divide-and-rule tactics that have plagued us for centuries. Imagine a united Africa where our resources fuel our mosques, our madrasas, and our markets, not foreign banks. This is not a dream, it is a divine imperative, for Allah says in Surah An-Nisa, and hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided. Now let us delve deeper into the vital role of our spiritual leaders, the imams, the scholars, the elders who guide our souls, in this sacred struggle for self-actualization. Self-actualization, my brothers and sisters, is not a Western concept. It is the Islamic pursuit of ihsan, excellence in worship and action, where we realize our full potential as caliphas, stewards of Allah's earth. For too long, our spiritual guides have been confined to the minbar on Fridays, offering wisdom in isolation while the world burns around us. But I say to you, integrate them into the heart of our national and continental revival. Let our imams not only lead prayers but also mobilize communities for development projects, mediate in conflicts born of misunderstanding, and preach sermons that weave the threads of faith with the fabric of patriotism. Consider the profound enhancement this brings to our efforts. When spiritual leaders join the struggle, perhaps by forming councils that advise on ethical governance, or by leading interfaith dialogues to counter extremist narratives, they infuse our actions with barakah, divine blessing. This involvement transforms the fight from a mere political endeavor into a spiritual one, rooted in taqwa, God consciousness. It counters the manipulation of religion by extremists, who claim to fight for Islam while killing the innocent, by showing that true jihad is building, not destroying. Historically, think of the great Islamic empires of West Africa, like the Songhai under Askia Muhammad, where scholars and rulers collaborated to create societies of learning and justice. Today, in Burkina Faso, if our imams partner with the government to educate youth against radicalization, we weaken the insurgents' grip and strengthen our defenses. Moreover, this partnership fosters a profound sense of belonging, a ummah that feels ownership in its destiny. When a young Muslim sees his imam standing alongside soldiers in defense of the nation, or collaborating on agricultural cooperatives that provide halal livelihoods, he no longer feels alienated. He feels empowered, part of a greater whole. This belonging heals the wounds of marginalization, where poverty and exclusion have driven some to despair. It creates communities where faith is not a refuge from reality, but a force shaping it. Psychologically and spiritually, it aligns with the Prophet's example in Medina, where he built a society uniting diverse tribes under justice, creating loyalty not through fear but through shared purpose. In Africa at large, imagine spiritual leaders from Senegal to Somalia convening to advocate for debt relief or resource sovereignty. Such unity would amplify our voice on the global stage, making Africa not a beggar, but a leader. But let us go even deeper. The involvement of spiritual leaders addresses the soul of our struggle. In a world where materialism erodes faith, they remind us that true self-actualization comes from submission to Allah, not to imperial powers. They can draw from fiqh to guide ethical economic policies, ensuring our government's works align with Sharia principles like zakat for social welfare. This enhances efficiency. Studies and experiences from Islamic nations show that faith-based mobilization increases community participation, reducing corruption and boosting resilience. For instance, in our fight against terrorism, imams who preach authentic Islam can de-radicalize minds, turning potential threats into allies. This sense of belonging extends to women, youth, and elders, making every Muslim feel like a stakeholder in Africa's renaissance. Yet, there is more to explore in how this synergy can transform our continent. When spiritual leaders champion self-actualization, they bridge the gap between the sacred and the secular, ensuring that our governments are not godless machines but vessels of divine justice. They can lead in environmental stewardship, drawing from the Quran's emphasis on preserving the earth, to support sustainable development across Africa. This not only enhances our collective effort by adding moral authority but also cultivates a deep, abiding sense of belonging, where every prayer is a pledge of allegiance to our shared future, every act of worship a step toward liberation. My brothers and sisters, envision a Burkina Faso, an Africa, where the minarets rise not in isolation but as pillars of a thriving society, where our faith illuminates the path to prosperity and peace. This vision becomes reality when we recognize the vital role that Muslims play in governance, a role ordained by Allah Himself, for He has entrusted us as vicegerents on earth, as stated in Surah Al-Baqarah. And mention, O Muhammad, when your Lord said to the angels, "Indeed, I will make upon the earth a successive authority." Governance is not the domain of the elite or the secular. It is a sacred trust, a form of ibadah when conducted with justice, compassion, and adherence to Sharia principles. Muslims, with our emphasis on ADL, justice, amana, trustworthiness, and shura, consultation, are uniquely positioned to infuse governance with moral integrity, ensuring that policies reflect the will of Allah rather than the whims of man. Delve with me into this profound truth. When Muslims are actively and well involved in governance, it becomes a fortress against the storms of terrorism and insecurity that ravage our lands. Consider the chaos we face today in the Sahel, insurgents who cloak their violence in distorted interpretations of Islam, preying on the vulnerable, the unemployed youth, the disenfranchised communities. But when faithful Muslims step into roles of leadership, from local councils to national cabinets, they bring the light of true Islam to dispel these shadows. Involvement means more than mere participation. It means embedding Islamic ethics into every decision, promoting equitable resource distribution to alleviate poverty, which extremists exploit as a recruiting tool, fostering education that teaches authentic tafsir of the Quran, countering radical ideologies at their root, and implementing restorative justice systems inspired by Hudud and Tazir, which prioritize rehabilitation over retribution. thus reducing recidivism and societal fractures. Think deeply on how this engagement diminishes terrorism. History bears witness. In the golden age of Islamic civilization, under caliphs like Umar ibn al-Khattab, Muslim involvement in governance created societies so just and secure that a woman could travel alone from one end of the empire to the other without fear. Today, in Burkina Faso, if Muslims, imbued with the Prophet's sunnah of mercy and strategy, hold positions in security apparatuses, they can design counter-terrorism strategies that are culturally sensitive, community-driven, and faith-aligned. For instance, integrating Muslim scholars into intelligence operations allows for the early detection of radicalization through mosque networks, turning places of worship into bastions of prevention rather than potential breeding grounds. When Muslims govern well, they address root causes like economic inequality, drawing from zakat models to fund job creation in jihadist hotspot regions, thus starving extremists of their narrative that the state is an enemy of the faithful. Furthermore, this involvement fosters inclusivity, weaving a social fabric so tight that insecurity cannot penetrate. Insecure states thrive on division, but Muslim-led governance promotes Ummah-wide solidarity, as per the Hadith. The Muslim Ummah is like one body. If the eye is suffering, then the whole body is in pain. By involving Muslims in policymaking, we ensure representation that mirrors our diverse populations, Sunnis, Sufis, and reformists alike, reducing grievances that fuel insurgencies. Delving deeper, empirical insights from across Africa reveal that nations with strong Muslim participation in governance, such as Senegal with its Murid Brotherhood influencing economic policies, experience lower levels of violent extremism. Why? Because such involvement builds trust. Citizens see their leaders praying far alongside them, implementing halal economic reforms that curb corruption, and negotiating peace with a Quran in hand rather than a gun. This trust erodes the appeal of terrorists, who rely on portraying governments as apostate or foreign puppets. But let us probe even further into the mechanisms at play. Well-involved Muslims in governance can leverage fatwas and khutbahs to delegitimize terrorist groups, labeling them as Khawarij, outcasts from true Islam, as the Prophet warned against those who kill believers indiscriminately. This spiritual warfare, combined with practical measures like border security informed by Islamic principles of hospitality yet vigilance, creates a multi-layered defense. Insecurity often stems from weak institutions, but Muslim ethics strengthen them. Emphasizing transparency to combat the bribery that enables arms smuggling, or promoting intercommunal dialogues based on the Treaty of Hudaybiyah to resolve ethnic tensions before they escalate into violence. Across Africa, envision Muslims in parliaments advocating for continental security pacts, like expanding the alliance of Sahel states with Islamic arbitration councils, turning potential battlegrounds into zones of cooperation. Yet, the depth of this impact extends to the psychological and communal realms. When Muslims are integral to governance, it humanizes authority, making the state a protector rather than an oppressor, which in turn encourages reporting of suspicious activities without fear of stigma. This proactive citizenry, inspired by the command to enjoin good and forbid evil, Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, becomes the first line of defense against insecurity. Delving into case studies, consider how in Nigeria, Muslim governors who integrated Sharia-compliant community policing reduced Boko Haram's influence in certain areas by addressing local injustices swiftly. Similarly, in our own Burkina Faso, empowering Muslim leaders in rural administrations could transform volatile regions, where faith-based initiatives provide alternatives to extremism. Vocational training framed as fulfilling fard kifaya, collective obligations for societal welfare. And as we explore this even more profoundly, we see that Muslim involvement mitigates the external factors exacerbating terrorism, such as foreign interventions that destabilize our nations. Faithful governance would prioritize sovereignty, negotiating international aid with conditions that respect Islamic values, thus preventing the resentment that breeds radicals. It would foster Pan-African Muslim networks, sharing intelligence and best practices, creating a united front where insecurity in one country is addressed as a threat to all. My dear Ummah, Picture a governance where Muslims in positions of authority embody the essence of our deen, not as mere officials but as exemplars of righteousness, whose actions inspire emulation and safeguard the honor of Islam itself. For it is imperative that Muslims in government play a good and emulating role, one that reflects the purity of our faith and prevents any blemish from tarnishing its sacred name. Too often, we have seen the tragedy of those who claim the mantle of leadership yet succumb to corruption, nepotism, or self-interest, thereby inviting scorn upon our religion and providing fodder for those who seek to vilify Muslims as hypocrites. But I say to you, let us reject this path. When a Muslim leader governs with integrity, upholding promises, rejecting bribes, and treating all citizens with equity, it becomes a living dawah, an invitation to Islam through deeds rather than words. This emulation-worthy conduct draws from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was known as Al-Amin, the trustworthy, even before his prophethood, setting a standard that elevated the perception of Muslims in Mecca. Delving deeper, consider how such a role preserves the sanctity of our religion in the eyes of the world. In Burkina Faso and across Africa, where Islam is woven into the fabric of society, any misstep by a Muslim in power reverberates far beyond politics. It echoes in mosques, markets, and international forums, potentially reinforcing stereotypes peddled by adversaries. If a Muslim official embezzles funds meant for orphanages or favors kin over the needy, it not only erodes public trust but also invites accusations that Islam breeds injustice, echoing the whispers of colonial propagandists who sought to divide us. Conversely, when Muslims in government emulate the caliphs of old, like Abu Bakr, who lived modestly despite ruling an empire, they silence detractors and elevate Islam's image. This is not superficial. It is a strategic jihad against misinformation, where personal piety becomes national strength. Psychologically, it fosters admiration rather than resentment, turning non-Muslims into allies who see in our leaders the mercy of Ar-Rahman, thus bridging communal divides and reducing the fertile ground for interfaith conflicts that exacerbate insecurity. But to achieve this, Muslims in government must prioritize putting God and humanity first. For this is the cornerstone of transformative change and the true narrative that governments must convey to their people. Allah commands in Surah Al-Ma'idah, "O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm for Allah, witnesses in justice, and do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness." Placing God first means every policy, every decree, is filtered through the lens of taqwa, fear of Allah, ensuring that actions align with divine will rather than fleeting gains. Humanity follows naturally, as our faith teaches that serving people is serving Allah. The Hadith states, "The creation is the family of Allah, so the most beloved creation to Allah is he who does good to his family." In practice, this means prioritizing the welfare of the oppressed, the widows in displaced camps, the farmers battling drought, the youth yearning for education, over personal or partisan agendas. When governments narrate this priority through actions, like allocating resources to halal microfinance programs that uplift communities without usury, it rewrites the story from one of exploitation to one of empowerment, fostering loyalty and participation. Let us probe even further into how this God and humanity first approach catalyzes profound change. In the narrative of governance, words alone are hollow. It is the lived example that shapes perceptions. Imagine a Muslim minister who, facing a crisis like food scarcity, invokes zakat principles to redistribute wealth equitably, publicly accounting for every CFA franc. This not only alleviates hunger but also communicates a narrative of transparency and compassion, countering the cynicism that breeds apathy or rebellion. Delving into historical parallels, recall the Ottoman era, where sultans who put God first by consulting ulama and humanity by establishing waqfs for public good created enduring legacies of stability and progress. In modern Africa, this could manifest in anti-corruption drives framed as fulfilling the Prophet's warning against galal, misappropriation, changing the governmental narrative from rulers versus ruled to servants united with the served. Such a shift reduces terrorism by addressing grievances at their core. When people see leaders fasting with them during Ramadan, sharing iftar with the poor, it humanizes authority and diminishes the allure of extremists who promise heavenly justice while delivering earthly chaos. Moreover, putting God and humanity first enhances systemic reforms. It encourages shura-based decision-making, where Muslim leaders consult widely, incorporating voices from all strata, thus democratizing governance in an Islamic framework and building a narrative of inclusivity. This deep integration prevents the bad name that arises from authoritarianism, instead projecting Islam as a force for humane progress. Economically, it means pursuing development that honors creation, sustainable mining that protects the environment as a trust from Allah, or healthcare initiatives inspired by the Prophet's emphasis on healing the sick. Socially, it transforms narratives around women and minorities, ensuring rights aligned with Quran's equity, thereby attracting global respect and investment. Psychologically, for the people, this narrative instills hope. governance becomes a reflection of divine mercy, where change is not imposed but inspired, leading to voluntary compliance and reduced insecurity. Across Africa, if Muslim-led governments adopt this ethos, it could forge a continental renaissance, where policies prioritize human dignity, eradicating child labor through faith-based education drives, or resolving conflicts via Hudna-inspired truces, thus altering the global perception from failed states to models of ethical rule. Yet, there is still more depth to uncover in how this commitment reshapes our collective destiny. When Muslims in government emulate excellence by putting God and humanity at the forefront, it creates a ripple effect that, yet, there is still more depth to uncover in how this commitment reshapes our collective destiny. When Muslims in government emulate excellence by putting God and humanity at the forefront, it creates a ripple effect that extends beyond borders and generations, healing old wounds and forging new paths of understanding. For far too long, my brothers and sisters, Muslims have been unjustly painted by the brush of suspicion and fear, labeled as terrorists in the eyes of the world, a narrative crafted not from truth but from the shadows of misinformation, media distortions, and the agendas of those who profit from division. This pernicious stereotype, rooted in the aftermath of global events manipulated by imperial forces, has cast a long shadow over our ummah, portraying us as inherently violent, backward, or incompatible with modernity. It ignores the billions of Muslims who live in peace, contribute to societies, and embody the Prophet's message of salam, peace, as the core of our faith. This misperception has fueled Islamophobia, justified invasions, and perpetuated cycles of marginalization, where our youth are profiled, our mosques surveilled, and our contributions erased from history's pages. Delve with me into the heart of this injustice. The label of terrorist affixed to Muslims stems from a deliberate conflation of extremist fringes with the mainstream faithful, amplified by Western media empires that sensationalize isolated acts while ignoring the daily heroism of Muslims. Doctors healing the sick, teachers enlightening minds, farmers sustaining communities, all in accordance with Islam's call to serve. In Africa, this stereotype has been weaponized to justify foreign interventions, drone strikes, and resource grabs, painting our resistance to neo-colonialism as jihadist threats rather than rightful self-defense. Psychologically, it erodes our self-image, leading some to internalize shame or, worse, to radicalize in defiance, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Socially, it isolates us, breeding distrust among neighbors and hindering alliances needed for progress. Economically, it deters investment in Muslim-majority regions, perpetuating poverty that extremists then exploit. Historically, recall how colonial powers divided us along religious lines, fostering animosities that linger today. Post 9/11, this escalated globally, with policies like travel bans and surveillance states reinforcing the narrative that Muslims are the other, inherently suspect. But herein lies the transformative power of involvement. If Muslims engage well in politics, stepping into the arenas of governance with integrity and vision, the world will witness that we are not the caricatures they have been led to believe. This active participation shatters stereotypes through lived proof, humanizing us in the public eye and rewriting the narrative from fear to respect. Imagine a Muslim president, like myself, negotiating peace accords with wisdom drawn from the Sunnah, or Muslim parliamentarians crafting laws that protect the vulnerable. Such actions demonstrate that Islam is a source of stability, not chaos. Delving deeper, this involvement counters the terrorist label by showcasing diversity within our faith. Sufi leaders promoting tolerance, reformist scholars advocating for women's rights, and youth activists using social media to highlight charitable works. It shifts perceptions incrementally. First locally, where communities see Muslim officials resolving disputes fairly, then nationally, as policies reduce inequality and foster harmony, and globally, as African Muslim-led nations emerge as models of resilient development. Probe further into the mechanisms of this perceptual change. Well-involved Muslims in politics provide counter-narratives through visibility. When a hijab-wearing minister addresses the UN on climate justice, or a bearded governor inaugurates schools in remote villages, it normalizes our presence in power, eroding the exoticized or villainized image. Psychologically, exposure theory in social sciences supports this. Frequent positive interactions reduce prejudice, turning them into us. In Burkina Faso, as we Muslims lead the charge against actual terrorism while building inclusive societies, it forces reevaluation. How can we be terrorists when we are the ones defending innocence, reclaiming our narrative from hijackers? Across Africa, This engagement could inspire a pan-continental movement, where Muslim politicians collaborate on initiatives like the African Union, projecting unity and capability, thus attracting partnerships based on mutual respect rather than paternalism. It also empowers our diaspora, who face discrimination abroad, by pointing to homegrown successes as evidence of our potential. Even more profoundly, this political involvement reclaims our agency in storytelling. For centuries, others have defined us: colonial chroniclers, Hollywood scripts, biased news outlets. But when Muslims govern effectively, we author our own history. Tales of compassion, innovation, and justice that align with the Quran's emphasis on being the best community produced for mankind. This not only diminishes the terrorist stigma but elevates global discourse, encouraging interfaith dialogues where misconceptions are dismantled through facts, not fiction. In essence, it fulfills the prophetic mission of being witnesses unto humanity, proving through deeds that Islam is a mercy to the worlds. My beloved Ummah, as we embrace this path, supporting our government's works, integrating spiritual leaders, involving ourselves deeply in governance with God and humanity at the helm, we forge a Burkina Faso, an Africa, radiant with promise. Let your actions be your testimony, your faith your shield, and your unity your strength. Together, we will rise, inshallah, to claim the self-actualization that is our divine right. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.